Andre, I'll let you speak. Don't worry about it.
Oh, thank you.
I will take a round of 5 hands first, and then we'll go from there.
So for the most part, people started talking about the compromise that was made in 1994, and the Constitution was referred to, right? So I'd like to understand around, so and this is probably Johan, right? Around, so when we talk restorative justice, are we assuming the state is the only holder of that? And if so, do we, yeah, it just sounds like we have amnesia around there was a history before that, right? So I hear a little bit of the experience of being an Afrikaner in the context of South Africa, but I'm not sure if we're talking about, so that we talk about the hurt, but what does that mean for being Afrikaans and the past that is contentious, I think. So when you talk about restorative justice now, what are your thoughts in a personal level and not the Constitution? Because I feel like we aspire to be the Constitution, and I get the feeling we all agree to that. But our daily relationships are governed by both our history, our present, that is shaped by the relational.
Speaker Human or Human, I would like to know, because I'm not aware of such, is AfriForum / Solidariteit or / maybe any other Afrikaans culture preservation organization mandated in any way to contribute to reconciliation, transformation and justice? And if so, what work are they doing? You mentioned just now that the basis of affirmative action should not be race. What should it be then, if not race? And what work is some AfriForum or a similar organization contributing towards transformation, justice and reconciliation? Are they mandated at all to do any such work? I'm hearing you, and I would like to know from everybody maybe what makes you proud to be Afrikaans. Everybody said, I'm so proud to be Afrikaans. I would like to know what, because I personally don't have an answer to that question. Thank you.
The establishment or the preservation of Afrikaans in certain universities, I think there was something in the newspaper about trying to set up an Afrikaans university itself. Won't that further the theme of separation being apartheid? Because you'd have, as you were mentioning, Stellenbosch is in a predominantly Afrikaans area, so you're going to have that. So what about people who want to learn? And that makes it simply what apartheid tried to achieve. And secondly, how does that deal with the issue where people still view Afrikaans as an oppressive language? As opposed to pressing it on people, wouldn't it be better to try to teach people to love the language as opposed to saying you need to learn the language?
To Mr. Human, so you talked about the fighting for the rights for the community that you identify with. Just a quick question: do you fight for the rights of any black communities?
Johan Crew, I think you can answer the first one. It was kind of directed at you.
Apart from the fact that it's my job to promote the Constitution, I have to say something about it. There's a long, windy legal argument about restorative justice and the state's duty in terms of the Bill of Rights and so forth. For me personally, it is about having compassion. It's about trying to understand what the world that someone else in South Africa is living in is all about. Restorative justice is apart from the formal and formalistic part there that the government must play a big part in. It's certainly not only the role of government. I see it as my duty to reach out to fellow South Africans, to have compassion for the circumstances in which they grew up, in which they live, in which influence how they look at me. I mean, I have to think about the way I think about other people in order to understand how subjective I am when I look at this audience, or when I look at my neighbor, when I look at a colleague. I see it as my duty, and I think in that sense, restorative justice becomes sometimes for me the understanding to stand back and let somebody else have the chance. And I value that. I mean, that's not all white South Africans may think alike, but that's my view. That's my personal view. It's my view that I embrace the need to come to terms with what a truly equalitarian society should look like. And that, yes, that would mean, given the circumstances in our history, I sometimes have to take that step back, and I'm willing to do that.
Thank you. Your question was, just to summarize, what does AfriForum do for transformation, and examples of that, and I think it also ties in with the last question, so I can maybe answer it simultaneously. And you also asked why Afrikaans, why would you be proud to be Afrikaans? Am I correct? I think transformation, when one looks at it, we shouldn't look at transformation as meaning that there's only one stakeholder that should be let's say, a furthering transformation, something like that, like government. But government does have a big role and a responsive role. Government, they are mandated by the very constitution we all quoted numerous times here. And they've made some progress, but as I stated, our view also on transformation is not that race shouldn't play a factor, but what I said, that race shouldn't be the absolute race. It shouldn't be the only test. There's a difference. I'm not saying race shouldn't be a factor. I said you shouldn't use a strict absolute race criteria or percentage to advance transformation. What is AfriForum doing? Well, the way to answer the question would be to ask what is the mandate of AfriForum. And as it is made clear tonight, the mandate of AfriForum, they are a civil rights, it's a NPC, it's a non-profit, there's a non-profit company with certain aims and goals which it wishes to achieve, and it is to further, it's firstly to fight for the communities which they live in. Now AfriForum's got more than 130 active branches, and they deal with a lot of local government matters there, and that's a way of transforming, in the sense that you are bettering communities. You're trying to create opportunities for the citizens and residents of the communities, and you would find in the communities that people much more want to invest and spend time with people in the broader part of the community because it's more closer to them. So the mandate of AfriForum is to hold the government accountable. It's to be able to take in strong viewpoints and strong argument. So it fulfills a greater role than that transformation. And it's, for the most part, and I'm honest here, it's a reactionary organization. So you have rights which we wish to protect and rights which we think we ought to and we are able to protect, and you have organized around that. So it's not an organization, for example, like I forgot the name now, they've done many court cases, but Equal Education or Section 27, where their mandate is to further transformation in different views. So it shouldn't be the case that if your mandate and your constitution doesn't say we are transforming to a certain position, that therefore you are against it, or you are trying to preserve a race or something like that. So that's not the way it should be. So I hope it answers your question. Is with regards to what's the mandate, and I think we do have all a responsibility to further it, but it's not the central theme of AfriForum. It's just like if you have a pool club and you ask them to incorporate a sort of ideal, or which is just not part of the constitution, but you can't lay it at their doorstep and say therefore you are anti that and anti that. Does it answer your question? You're welcome to ask. And the other one, why Afrikaans? Sorry. Why I'm proud for Afrikaans? Well, I think Afrikaans is a language. It's a magnificent language outcome. As Andre explained, we are a group that came from French Huguenots, from Germans, from Dutch, everywhere, and we have settled here not because we were bored at Europe. There were fights and wars going on in Europe, and that was the time of that was the way of that time. And we established and we had a language which we fought for. We were able to translate the Bible from different languages to Afrikaans for the first time. Afrikaans is a language, first time 1925, and I must say it forms part of my identity, and I feel like I belong to the community I do when I can interact and exchange and be in Afrikaans. But as I said, it doesn't feel, many people do not share the same significance and have the same feeling, but for a substantial portion we do. And to be able just to speak it and be in a community of Afrikaners and associate with Afrikaners and speaking Afrikaans, that's meaningful to us, and that's why it's important, worth fighting for.
You haven't said anything about the universities. Let me just say one thing about that, and then I want to say one thing about why I like being in Afrikaans. I just want to say that I am of the view that all public universities, for practical reasons, should be English. That's my personal view. And there could be some Afrikaans in between, But Afrikaans used a huge amount of public resources and a huge amount of time to build up Afrikaans as an academic language, and that's a really good thing. It shouldn't be lost. So I'm very much for the right of Afrikaners to make a privately funded Afrikaans university. In other words, to continue the good work of having Afrikaans as an academic language. A huge amount has been spent. That shouldn't be lost. That would be a mistake. And a private university, I think, always reserves the right. In places like the States, you have got all-women universities. I don't know why you'd want to go to one of those, but there are all-women universities. And then there are all-guy universities, and there are religious universities of specific groups. I don't think there's a problem for me in that. But my personal view is that all public universities are funded by tax money, almost totally. 66% of their funding comes from tax money. And my view is they should be English for practical reasons. I would prefer that there be other languages developed too, but it's just too expensive for our nation. We can't do it at the moment. So maybe in 150 years, our kids, grandkids might do that. In terms of being Afrikaans, I just want to say I wouldn't have been an African if I weren't Afrikaans. I love being an African. So I'm very proud to be Afrikaans. You can be an English African, I guess, but it's much more difficult. Because as President Zuma mentioned the other day, Afrikaans is a truly African language. Okay? That makes me an African, although my skin might be white. I love the music. Not all of it. Some of it's horrible, but some of it's quite good. Okay? And there's been an explosion of art and creativity amongst Afrikaans people since '94. I think our hardiness and our commitment to this country, and even although we've been difficult and stubborn in certain ways, the contributions we've made to this country in the past 20 years and before are real contributions. And yes, there were mistakes, but I mean, to discount the good things because we made mistakes would be a bigger mistake. Okay, so yeah, that's my answer.
I just want to make a point about Afrikaans, and it relates to universities as well to a certain extent. I think the question about why being proud, or why am I proud being Afrikaans, I would share a view, I think, with Andre, that I'm proud of being a South African. I'm proud of being an African. Afrikaans is just the way through which I express that proudness, being a South African. Afrikaans doesn't define who I am. And I spent a big part of my youth and most part of my career abroad. I've worked across this continent in, I think, 43 of the 53 nations. I relate with the continent in a different way. I don't relate with the Huguenots or the settlers or whoever came to South Africa at that point in time. I'm succinctly proud being Afrikaans speaking and the way that I express myself in such a community. But I think one mistake that we make in South Africa quite often is that Afrikaans is not a homogeneous group. I mean, very few people know, apart from the fact that Afrikaans is statistically the third biggest language in South Africa. It's spoken 60% by coloureds and black South Africans. Only 40%, it's a stat. Go and look at Stats essays, it's the last census. Only 40% of Afrikaans speaking people in South Africa are white. 60% are coloured and black. Mother tongue speakers. I'm not even talking about second and third languages. One have to consider then, and that relates to the question about universities and the question of language rights and cultures and so on. How do you deal with the third biggest language in South Africa, in which you may well discriminate against 60% of people who were previously so-called disadvantaged, brown and black South Africans, by not allowing them access to a language? I mean, if you look at some coloured South Africans in the Northern Cape and the Western Cape, they only speak Afrikaans. Not giving them access to any other language or to Afrikaans may well be discrimination in a paradoxical manner. But I think that's a debate. I don't have an answer to that. That's a debate we need to have at some point. Was I think the stereotypical approach, looking at Afrikaans as a possession of Afrikaners, is a wrong approach.
And I think the gentleman over there, you asked what we do for black communities, correct? Yeah, is that the question? Yeah, black communities. What AfriForum does, they fight for not specifically communities in defining them as white or black. What they do is they fight for their members. So how it works is you apply at AfriForum and you establish a branch. Now we have a few branches where there are black chairpersons because they were simply getting sick and tired of local government not performing, and they call us up and they say it looks like we are active, because what we do, if there's a pipe broken, we go fix it, and we then issue a summons against to the municipality and say we want that money back because we had to do your job. And we help where we can. For example, I did an eviction application for the Walmanstal Community Property Association. It's in northern part of Pretoria. They were historically disadvantaged. The apartheid government moved them to Soshanguve, and they had very deep historical roots at that specific piece of land. They applied for it at government. They eventually got it, and there's a list of beneficiaries which they are entitled to it, and they will receive ultimately a title deed. And what happened then is there was a surge of illegal occupants over there, and we have consulted the community, and we said we cherish property rights. We've done so on many forums. We've said that property rights is one of the important rights of the Constitution for various reasons, and because of that we will assist them. And we have assisted them in court action application since 2012, and we've evicted I don't know how many illegal occupants. So the race is not a test for this. The test is, if you're a member, remember we had a congress not too long ago, and there were black chairpersons, and they were very, very happy with them. And so it's not, the race is not a test. If you're a member and you're willing to be active and you're willing to participate in the branch, you will feel very at home.
Thanks.
I have a question for Andre. You, in your initial remarks, mentioned a sense of loss, and I'm quite interested to hear more about what you feel that sense of loss relates to, and how you feel people are grappling or not grappling with it.
Andre, you mentioned that Afrikaners are new rich. Do you have any advice for the even newer rich black South Africans? Johan, you mentioned equality. One question. Okay. Never mind. As a goal, as a starting point, or as an ultimate starting point?
I rise because I'm not content with the way that restorative justice has been addressed tonight. So Johan mentioned compassion, which angered me a little bit, and also pointed to the Constitution, which I don't really understand. How do you want to address that? 'Cause restitution to me means restoring something that was stolen to its rightful owner. So how do you propose that that which was stolen is restored to the rightful owners?
I think my question is to Johan. You mentioned a comment about Patrice Motsepe's kids. So I would like to know, generally, as a white perspective, do white people perceive black people who, say, live in Sandton and you drive a Mercedes-Benz as not being disadvantaged anymore?
This question is to all three of you, but specifically to Werner. What about Afrikaans culture needs to be defended? In other words, what do you feel is at risk in Afrikaans culture that needs to be guarded and protected, that it doesn't have rights already? Or in simpler terms, what evidence is there to suggest that Afrikaans culture, morals, wealth, or whatever it is actually under attack and needs representation?
This one is directed at Andre. You spoke about the need for us to to realize that we're on the same side. What can you do? What can you show a black person like me in South Africa that you are on my side? When everything in white South Africa has informed me that I am other and all things wrong. Especially without an owning up of what whiteness did and said to me at a most fundamental level. Thank you.
Just about the sense of loss, I'm going to try and keep it short because otherwise we're going to be busy very long. Look, in my experience, if the first time you get something, you quite surprised, whatever it is, anything new, somebody makes you breakfast in bed, the first time you think, wow, that was nice. The second time you still think, but a little bit less, wow, that was nice-ish. The third time you say, oh yes, breakfast in bed. And after about the fifth time you say, excuse me, where's breakfast in bed? Okay. So what happened to Afrikaans people is that we got used to certain things, having certain rights, having, I would argue, an artificially created South Africa that worked in a certain way. We were in power. We were able to steer the political processes in this country directly through voting. I voted in one white-only election, and that was a yes-no vote. That was my only one, but that's what Afrikaners had. Afrikaners, you must understand that Afrikaners had everything they wanted in this country. So when you speak of a sense of loss, I'm not saying that that's a rational thing. For nobody, a sense of loss is a rational thing. It is a visceral emotional experience of having had something and having lost it, okay? And even if it's something good that you've lost, maybe it's even something that you should have lost. As in Afrikaner's case, it was a mistake. But it doesn't mean that you don't experience an undescribed, unclear sense of loss going with that, okay? And I think being part of, 7%-ish of the national population, the fact that you will never steer that process again, and that's okay, I'm fine with that. I don't have a sense of loss personally anymore, but I grew up with a certain South Africa, and I had to make the changes to the one we have now, which I absolutely love. But I had to work through a few things to get to the point where I am today, and it will probably not stop for the rest of my life. Whereas my daughter will grow up in this country and not experience any sense of loss, because this is her country. Okay, so I think there's a lot more to be said about that, but let me just stop there.
Thanks. I think on the first question in relation to equality and whether it's a starting point or a goal, I think it's both. Positive equality is a starting point. The Constitution affords us the right to be equal before the law and to equal protection by the law. That's a right. Nobody can take it away from you. That's an inherent right enshrined in the Bill of Rights. That's a starting point. The goal, however, is substantive equality, and that's what to do with that right. It's transforming that right into the ability to be truly equal, the ability to truly have substantive equal opportunity. And that's a goal we need to aspire to. We're not there, and I'm not sure in any country whether you'll ever get there. As I said earlier, there's no such thing as a truly equal society. It's an aspiration and it's a goal, but we have to keep on aspiring. That's the crucial bit. And on the question of land, and I mean, obviously that is a highly emotive matter in South Africa at the moment. I can simply say that the Constitution provides for a framework that was based on a political settlement. There was a reason why 1913 was set as a particular cut-off date. That was a compromise. No negotiation is ever a win for any one side. It was a compromise achieved by all or virtually all of the political parties involved in the negotiations. My view at the moment is that restorative justice must be effected in context of the Constitution. I kept on referring to it because that's the only framework that we have in terms of which we have to live. We have no choice. That is the perimeter in terms of which we must live our personal lives, live our organizational lives, live our politics, live whatever we do. That is the guiding framework for South Africa. We have to effect land reform in context of Section 25 in its totality, not bits and pieces of Section 25. You have to read it holistically and apply that. We are far cry away from having it resolved from an administrative point, which is dismal. I mean, looking at the number of land claims being resolved, but also I think from point of true will. That's a point that I think we'll keep on discussing and debating as long as we talk about it and not shout at each other about it. I think the last question, if I remember correctly, was about my comment on Patrice Motsepe and on disadvantage or not. I think that is exactly the crucial point that we have to discuss in context of transforming a nation. Of course, I can't speak, and with the question is whether I think all white people think so. I don't know. I can't speak on behalf of all white people. I dare not. What is crucial is that we start asking the question of what does disadvantage mean today? And I revert back to my point on equality. There's a positive legal framework in terms of which people are benefiting. Discrimination is prohibited. Equality is promoted. The achievement of that framework is a different matter. So in between the legal framework allowing for equality and negating a disadvantaged position, we have to consider subjectively. We can't make a holistic assessment. Subjectively, case by case, have we achieved advancement in a particular case? And it may then well be that somebody living in Sandton earning a 7-digit salary is no longer disadvantaged, protected by a legal framework, a constitutional framework, being where he or she is or achieved what he or she has achieved. But I think that is the point. We have to reconsider that. We have to discuss what that means to be disadvantaged today. Can you compare somebody living in Sandton flying the high life with somebody living in Gugulethu with no running water and electricity? I leave that with the audience.
I think there's two questions. I think that question was directed to me as well, the question of the restorative justice. And I would just like to add a bit. I agree with most of what you once said, just that you said that the issue is that the pace of transformation is too slow, and you pose the answer to be nationalism. I would say my response there to would be, my objection to what you've said was, or the question you posed, the answer you posed, nationalism is a ideological viewpoint, not a moral one, and that's why I feel comfortable to differ with you on that. I think I'm a free market guy in the sense that I believe that a country's economy does best when there's competition, when in most countries where there's been a socialistic or a form of economic policy which is very, very much government control, the economic growth is very low, and the unemployment rate can spiral out of control. But that's just a comment on the issue, on the norm of nationalism. I think I differ with respect with your comment that most farmlands are in white hands, creating the picture that we just sit there with the land and doesn't want to share anything. You know, most of the farmers doing the land claims are very cooperative. They already started their farm workers. I'm not saying there are examples to the contrary, but enough people have transformed in their own farm, given portions of land to their workers, giving them a piece of land of their own to develop their own. So the property owner in this country, which is the largest property owner in this country, is government. It's not white people, it is government. And the land claims process has failed convincingly. I think in Free State it's like almost a 90% statistic of farms which fail. So you have productive farmlands, and then the farmer just getting land, and I've got very much sympathy for the farmer that gets this land because he hasn't learned the necessary skill to farm correctly on the land, and what happens is that the land just remains empty and it's starting being rented out. And I think if we are really serious, we would invest more in skill and to utilize the available land, and know that when a new farmer comes, then that process will be there. So I do not agree with nationalism, but I understand your viewpoint. The next one was regards to the Afrikaans culture and what is really at risk. I tried to address that in the beginning, to say what is it what we want, and I try to explain it in a sentence, saying we want a sustainable future, in the sense that Afrikaans remains essentially in the public sphere as well. I differ with you on a bit on the issue of public education and Afrikaans and other languages as well. But what is at risk is that will when it plays out, that will be diminished completely. We are already in a process, and you ask about evidence as well. We're already in a process where Afrikaans on all levels on the public sphere, business, instruction, primary school, high school, university, all public spheres that you can think of, Afrikaans already getting less and less and less and lesser. So the issue then is the answer then that Afrikaans should become a privatized language, only available in privatized institutions, or does it have a space in the public space? I would argue it does have a place in the public space. So what's at risk if it's away? It's a part of my identity and who I am. That's away. And although many people might not understand why it is important for one to be in a public setting and be able to speak Afrikaans or associate yourself with Afrikaners, for many people it is important. So that is what is at risk, that you are essentially becoming culturally and your identity is becoming privatized. You can be an Afrikaner in your house when the doors are closed, but as soon as you're in the public sphere, it's out. And if you're trying to make an argument for it, you're exclusive in nature, etc. I'm not saying that's your viewpoint, but I'm just saying that that is what is risk, and that is important enough for us to fight for. I hope it answers the question.
I got the question, I think, but please read it again. Okay. Right, it's about us being on each other's side. I got that part of the question, sorry, I didn't catch your name properly, but Sandile. Okay, Sandile, I must say, to me, that's the toughest question of the night. I think the fact that I'm sitting here tonight from a personal level, I don't have any vested interest in being here except being South African and having a chance to speak to some people who are not from the same racial group, how ridiculous term that even is. That I could be at home with my 2-year-old and my wife. And this is a way of stretching out my hand and saying, let's talk. You know, I want to understand on a personal level first. Let's just talk about this on a personal level. I would love to understand what you've experienced and where you've been. And I can honestly tell you, anybody who's been harmed by anybody else, you cannot be fixed, in inverted commas, it cannot be fixed from the outside. It has to be fixed from the inside to a large extent, and that could be something we do together. But there is no way in which I am powerless to fix that, except to stick out my hand and say, let's talk, let's spend time together, let's eat together, let's listen to each other. On a societal level, I think we're going to have to, as a society, figure out what is it going to take for black people, very general terms, so excuse it, but that's the only terms we can talk in, who have been hurt by what has happened in the past, which is most. What is it going to take for us to redevelop an element of trust and an element of being on each other's side and on the same side? What is it going to take? And that's not something I can answer as a white person. I can't. I don't know. I can tell you from personal experience and from working at the University of Johannesburg, for whom I do not speak, of course, but I can tell you I'm seeing a microcosm of that happening in my own work environment, with my own students, with my own colleagues. I can see that happening. Conversations taking place in a Soweto street with somebody who's 61, who experienced apartheid's hard, real bite, the real bad parts of what happened in this country, and having an amazing conversation where she was able to tell me so many things that opened my heart and my mind. I was willing to listen, and I still am. I would love to. But I think it's going to have to happen at a personal level for it to happen at a societal level. But we also need to know, as white people, and I can't speak for white people, but I'm going to make this statement, so forgive me. But as white people, we need to know what we need to do. What is it that's going to show you that we're on your side? Because to say to me, what am I going to do? It's like love languages, if you know the idea. You can try and show somebody else you care in the way that you know best. But if they don't experience that as caring, it's going to mean absolutely nothing. Okay? And even if some of those words that you have to tell us are hard to hear and difficult to implement, at least then we know what's supposed to be happening here. Okay? Because honestly, I think many white people don't have a clue. What are we supposed to do? What exactly will help? I can't become black. I'm not going to immigrate. So we need to find something else, you know? It's like being married. It's like being married. My wife and I have a rule, and that is that we are on each other's side. And that means when we argue, when we have a problem, when there's an issue, the one thing that is not even an option is the door. So let's sit together and talk until it's resolved. And that's what I would love to do. I'm obviously one person. I can only speak to so many people. But I think that's what we all need to do. So there's my sermon for the night. I'll take up collection afterwards.
Sure. Andre, I think you've essentially nailed what we're trying to start here with this process. What we're trying to do and hoping to do is to begin a process where relationships get built, and relationships in which people are on each other's side, and not relationships where people assume they know what the other wants. Where it's going to be about getting to know each other well enough to be able to then be able to ask the question, I thought you needed X, Y, Z. Is that what you needed? Thank you very much for listening. I know that at least, and I like to speak for myself and not for the Black nation. I've often felt that I think white people need to listen more than Black people. So I really appreciate you being here and listening to a white perspective that you probably don't want to hear. We all really appreciate that. And to you guys, having been up on the stage yesterday myself, thank you very much for making yourself vulnerable. I know how vulnerable it is to be up here and expose yourself to the potential abuse. We really appreciate that. I'm going to ask Pastor Simon to come and pray, just a closing prayer for us again, which wasn't scheduled, but I feel like it's something that's quite important post the discussion, as constructive as it was. An important thing, tonight you heard three perspectives. And we can call them three white perspectives, but this is not an exhaustive list of perspectives. We specifically went with more than one speaker, with three, because we wanted to show that there is more than one perspective. And in engaging with people, be cognizant of that fact. They don't necessarily speak for all white people, and I don't necessarily speak for all Black people. So keep that in mind. I don't know if I'm missing anything in terms of admin. I think we're covered. So please come and just close for us in prayer. Thanks. Oh, sorry, one other thing, sorry. On Sunday, we're going to have various churches across the province up dedicating their pulpits to the discussion of race. It's quite a huge number of churches that will be speaking on race. So maybe we should actually make available, we should try and make available a list of those churches. What? Yeah, send us an email and we'll let you know which one of your closest churches that will be dedicating its pulpit to race relations in the country. Thanks.
Great. I think the best way to close tonight is just in the way that this gentleman shared. Appreciate really your hearts and coming here. I just put up a post saying that South Africa desperately needs these kinds of conversations. Desperately. We need to hear each other in order to be on each other's side. So I want to pray along those lines. Father, in the name of Jesus, thank you for this evening. Thank you for what you have done. Thank you for softening our hearts, Lord. Even though this is quite a tough, tricky conversation, it's needed, Father. If we are to build a rainbow nation for future generations, we need to engage. And I pray that today will just be a start, a beginning of something good for our nation. And I pray, Father, that our kids will inherit the fruit of this conversation. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Before you go, also, I just want to extend a great gratitude from our side for Pastor Simon and Siasanga at the back there. I've been a terrible person administratively, and they've been gracious enough to handle all my many balls that we dropped, and for making your church available. We really appreciate it very much.
I just wanted to say, even though tonight was blacks only, our church is not only for Black people.
Thanks, Derek, for the security, and Derek's not Black. Thank you very much.